I am making a pumpkin roll. It didn't really feel right to not have something Thanksgiving related up on my channel. I'm not hosting Thanksgiving this year, but I'm still going to make my pumpkin roll. And I figured even though it's been a crazy day, it's one of those cleaning days. We're all familiar, hair's thrown up, hoodies on, but I have to make a pumpkin roll ahead of time. It's gonna go into the freezer once it's done and made and cooled off and all of that. And then that way, come Thanksgiving, it'll be ready the night before. We can pull it out and it'll be fine. Because I'm not hosting this year, I will offer my assistance when and where need be, of course, but I still make a pumpkin roll, and I will always make a pumpkin roll regardless who's cooking, who's hosting, doesn't matter. So I figured we'll make it together. Dishwasher's clean. Did you hear it singing? If you've never made a pumpkin roll before, maybe it looks like the technique seems hard, looks like there's a lot of steps involved. There kind of is, but it's incredibly easy to make, and I don't want it to look, I don't want anybody to feel like it's too much. You don't need to buy one. You don't have to rely and hope on other people to make one. You can do it yourself. In fact, you can do it, doesn't have to be pumpkin. You can do like a carrot cake one. I've seen red velvet. It's really just a sponge cake rolled up with that delicious cream cheese filling that we all love. The ingredients and of course the recipe and directions will be down below. I'll kind of briefly go over what we're doing, but while I get it made, I figured I'd tell you a Thanksgiving story on how this all started. So we are going to need 1 cup of sugar, 3/4 cup flour, 2/3 cup canned pureed pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling, just plain old pumpkin puree. If you don't have pumpkin, you can absolutely substitute it for sweet potato. You can substitute it for any kind of a squash, really. It's the other flavors that are going on that kind of will lend to the mind thinking it's pumpkin. You will need 3 eggs. I have my hen's eggs here. They'll have to be washed. ½ teaspoon of cinnamon, ½ cup of walnuts, which is optional. I probably would love having the walnuts on it. In all the years I've been making this, haven't made it that way. My family enjoys it just without the walnuts, but it's certainly an option. And then for your cream cheese filling, you of course need cream cheese that's been softened. You'll need a couple tablespoons of softened butter and 1 cup of powdered sugar. First step is making the cake. So we're gonna get all those ingredients incorporated into here. While I do that, I'll share a story. I first started making a pumpkin roll after I visited a friend's house for Thanksgiving. They just had a family Thanksgiving. It was a few days, maybe the weekend before actual Thanksgiving, and my friend invited me to her Thanksgiving. I'm thinking I was about 14 or 15 at the time. I've never been to somebody else's Thanksgiving. I only knew the kind of Thanksgivings my family had and the food that correlated with that. Now, this was a time before social media, before Pinterest, really before computers, at least in my home, became like popular. Some houses had computers, but still not a whole lot. It was within a couple years after that that I got a computer. But Food Network was a thing, and I loved the Food Network channel. And so I kind of was familiar with some foods that my family did not have with Thanksgiving. But I didn't realize how different some families are when it comes to the the foods that are served. Now my friend, her Thanksgiving wasn't, oops, 1 cup. Her Thanksgiving was not super abnormal compared to mine, but she did have a pumpkin roll at her Thanksgiving. We did not have pumpkin rolls. And I was offered one, and I felt too bad to decline. So I was, you know, polite, and I said, oh yes, sure, thank you. And I was nervous about trying it because I was not a fan of cream cheese. I envisioned this thing in front of me having like plain cream cheese in the middle, and I was just not, I was a little nervous to try it, I won't lie. But I did. I tried it, I ate it, I loved it. It's time to refill my cinnamon. So I came home, told my mom, I go, they had this thing called a pumpkin roll, and it was so good. And my mom says, I love pumpkin roll. And I was like, well, why don't we ever have it? And she goes, well, I don't, you know, I don't know. She just said something along the lines of like, maybe she didn't know how to make one. She didn't want to make one. I don't know if they were around in the stores, but my mom always had to do her grocery shopping based off of her pay schedule. And so depending on how far in advance her pay was in proximity to, of course, Thanksgiving, she couldn't buy too many things ahead of time unless, of course, it was a canned good item, which is, I feel like, a lot of what Thanksgiving is, or a freezer item. We always bought, what are those freezer pies? I can't even think of the name. I can see it, but that lady who makes pies, and they're in the freezer section, really popular. We had those for our pies, and of course they could go in the freezer until it was time for Thanksgiving. So I was like, oh, it was so good. And I asked my mom, I said, well, you know, maybe we can get the ingredients for me to try to make one. And I'm not sure how I came about the recipe. I think my mom used her computer at work, if memory serves me. And she looked up a recipe, she brought it, printed it off, brought it home to me. I looked it over and I was like, let's try it. That was the first year I made a pumpkin roll. And do you know, even my first attempt at making that pumpkin roll, it turned out amazing. Turned out amazing. So the thing with pumpkin roll, as you will see now, is you have to let it sit for a couple hours in the fridge and let it get cold, rolled up. You'll see that technique here in a minute if you're unfamiliar. Sizzling's my stove behind me because of course I have another project going in the kitchen today. My canners are back there. And then you fill it with your cream cheese, roll it up, and let it sit overnight in the fridge. So the following morning, Thanksgiving morning, I was slicing that pumpkin roll, and I was like, no one's gonna know if we try it because it's sliced. Who's gonna know there's a slice or two missing? And I asked my mom if she wanted to try one, and she was like, yeah. It was so good. Ever since that Thanksgiving, I have always made a pumpkin roll the day before so that my mom and I could enjoy a slice of it in the morning. I grew up, moved out of the home, and I still make it ahead of time so that I can give my mom a couple slices so that she can enjoy it Thanksgiving morning at her home. So I'll have my pumpkin roll, my daughter will have her pumpkin roll, and my mom will have her pumpkin roll. And ever since then, I have been the one providing pumpkin rolls. And then of course I serve it, you know, at the dinner as well. So that's the story behind how pumpkin roll evolved into becoming a staple for Thanksgiving in my home. Ever since that day, actually, little by little, I started to try and make my own everything. I was like, well, I could do a pumpkin roll. That was easy. And then I think I went on to maybe the following Thanksgiving, I tried to make all of our own desserts. So I made the pies. I'm not quite sure how homemade I did the pies. I want to say, I don't think I attempted my own pie crust for years. That, for some reason, seemed hard, and I'll be honest, it's still something I struggle with to this day. Of all the things I can do, something about that pie crust doesn't always come out right for me. But I think I did attempt doing everything else. I just probably bought the pie crust, Pillsbury pie crust, I'm sure. And then I think by the time I was 18, I was making Thanksgiving completely by myself. I think my mom always oversaw the turkey though. So, and then somewhere down the line it evolved into my making Christmas dinner as well. Even when I moved out on my own, then we started hosting Thanksgiving and Christmas at my house. And it's kind of been that way ever since. I'm 39. My birthday's in 2 days. So I've been making pumpkin roll, we'll say, 24 years. Whew, my gosh, when you put it that way. 24 years I've been making pumpkin roll. All right, so I've got it mixed together. It kind of looks like a cake batter because that's essentially what it is. It's like a spongy type of a cake. It's not like a dense cake. You'll see after it comes out, it looks spongy is the best way I can describe it. Oh, I did not put my 1 teaspoon of baking soda in here. If you want anything to happen to your cake and you want to have some sort of a rise, make sure you put your baking soda in there. I've made pumpkin rolls both with the canned pumpkin and fresh pumpkin that I've cooked down. I notice a difference between the two. Not enough to ever avoid using the fresh pumpkin if that's all you had. But I would say my preference would probably be canned pumpkin, just because they get that puree, you know, perfect. My oven has been preheated to 375. I have just a plain here cookie sheet. Now, a lot of recipes are going to tell you to use a jelly roll pan. Ever since the very first day I started making these, year after year after year, I told myself, I'm gonna get a jelly roll pan. 24 years later, still don't have one. At this point, I've given up. I don't see them like often. I can order one, I know that. Kind of takes the fun away from it though for me. And I really only see myself using it probably this one time of year. I've only ever used a cookie sheet before and it works out perfectly fine. But I do grease the bottom of it. Then I put my parchment paper on top, and that just helps my parchment paper to, you know, stay nicely in its place. I think one of these days, side note, I'm going to do a video all on the things I no longer purchase at the grocery store, if not just to save money, for health benefits as well. Cooking spray is one of them. I've not purchased Pam or anything of the sort in probably 5 years. I don't miss it, don't need it. When you have little contraptions like this, works just fine. Keep a jar on my stove with a brush that is meant just for greasing and oiling my pans like this. so that when I spray, if it doesn't seem like it gets a nice evenly type of spray, I just go in with my brush and I give it a, I do wash it every couple of days, depending on the type of cooking I have over the weekend is usually where I use it the most, and then I'll give it a wash. So it's just like that. All right, now we're gonna pour this cake into the pan. It's a relatively quick and easy process. It only cooks up for about 15 minutes. You'll wanna, keep an eye on it depending on your oven, of course. Most of the time involved is letting it cool down or sit overnight. Probably the most important step would be making sure this part is even. I'm not entirely sure what size my pan is, so I'll figure it out. I'll put it on the screen so you have an idea. You certainly don't want it too big or your cake will be way too thin, but you don't want it to be too small because then your cake will be way too thick, and you really need about this size because it does get just thick enough that it can roll very nicely. It won't cook too long. The thicker it is, the longer it has to cook. The harder it will be to roll. And the thinner it is, of course, you risk burning it up. Where did my, don't know, we'll use this. So 375, 15 minutes, and we'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do to prep for the next step. This is where you would sprinkle the walnuts on if you were going to use walnuts. It would be this step right before the oven. All right, next step involves some sort of a tea towel and powdered sugar. This tea towel has been used very, very lovingly. This tea towel has done a lot. It's seen a lot. It's a bit of a workhorse here in my kitchen. So it doesn't look clean, but trust me, it is. I actually just took it out of the wash yesterday. So these ones are my favorite. I don't even know where I got them from. I only have, I think, 3. So I've got other styles, but these ones are my favorite. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're going to get powdered sugar over top of the tea towel here. This will do a couple of things. Because we have to roll the cake, this helps to keep the cake from sticking, of course, to whatever it is we're rolling it inside of. It adds some sweetness to the cake as well. We are going to be turning the cake out after it gets out of the oven pretty much immediately. You're not going to wait for it to cool down. It will not roll if you do that. So it has to be hot. So you will not see the speckles of powdered sugar. After it sits in the fridge overnight, before you serve it, it'll be nice and cold. that's when you'll go ahead and give it some sprinkles of powdered sugar. And that's when, of course, it'll be noticeable. That's when you will see it. So this just helps to keep everything from sticking. Gives it some good flavor, some sweetened taste. Okay, you don't need a whole ton of a lot. You just need enough. I'm thinking, you know, girl measuring here. I'm thinking that's big enough. While that is cooking, I am going to go ahead and get the cream cheese frosting together. This is a time where if you have a handheld mixer, I would recommend using one. Mine broke and I have not replaced it. I will replace it, however, before Christmas, like well before Christmas, because I have a lot of stuff to do for Christmas cooking, and it's really important to have one of those. This is challenging on its own. I don't know where to set this. Let's see. I have my canning stuff set up over here because I have pork broth over here in this oven. I should change the name of my channel to The Busy Kitchen, because I feel like there's always a million projects going on in my kitchen. Two tablespoons of butter. I want that softened as well. We keep our butter out on the counter because it gets used up like every other day or so. I feel like I'm rotating through the butter, so we keep it on the counter. So it's pretty much always softened. Are you guys a countertop butter household? I actually could tell you a story. The first time I discovered room temperature butter, we always kept our butter in the fridge. In fact, I don't honestly think my mom bought real butter. It was usually, I think, margarine. That Crocker type of brand in that brown tub. I think we're all familiar with that brand. So I was at a friend's house and we had made toast in the morning for breakfast, and I was like, I'm looking for the tub in her fridge, and I was like, where's your butter? And she goes, oh, over in that dish. And I was like, on the counter? I was really convinced that that was going to poison me, because I'm thinking that surely cannot be okay. But, I was like, I don't know. I still ate it, obviously. Being a younger teenager and a kid, it's like wild the things we will do without like really thinking twice about it. But I was like, okay, I guess I'll have it. It was delicious. It was the best toast I have ever had in my life. And that's, I think, my first introduction then to like real butter as well. It wasn't margarine, but it was so good. So good. I think I went home and told my mom about that too. And she was just, I think she just had the thought of, well, that's nice, but our butter will stay in the fridge. So, there's probably a couple of times where my mom's thinking, I'm not letting you go to friends' houses anymore because you're always coming home with all these things we need to do and change. So I added the 1 cup of powdered sugar into here, and I'm just gonna work on getting this incorporated. Okay, so this looks good. It's definitely spongy. It's browned along the edges, which is why you want to be careful of not having it too thin, because your edges will burn up, Smells amazing. So what we're gonna do, so we're going to get this turned out. And dust everything. I didn't mean to do that. That's okay. What's cooking without making a mess? Now, if you are like, listen, I can't be bothered. I can't be asked to go through all of these steps. You can do this part, let it cool. You don't necessarily even have to take it out of the pan, although I probably would, just so that this doesn't get like, you know, sometimes it can get weird with the oil and stuff at the bottom. I would still probably turn it out. You can just leave it completely flat, let it cool, and ice it. It's gonna taste the same whether it's in a roll or in a square. So you can still do it without having to go through the whole process. All right, now what I think I did was, I think I wanna roll it this way. You don't wanna roll it short end over. It'll be really, really fat that way if you do it that way, and you don't get as much out of it. So you do want to roll it this way. And what I'm gonna do, and I took my powdered sugar away, gonna dust the this side of it real quick too. Not a lot. Making a mess. Okay, so I have some of my tea towel overlapping the sponge cake here. And now I'm just going to roll it. Like that. She's gonna sit in my fridge, maybe but an hour, hour and a half. She should be well more than cooled down, but of course it could be hours. It doesn't, you know, according to your schedule. And then we'll fill the inside. I just got this out of the freezer. No, I didn't. I just got this out of the fridge. Lord, it's been a long day. We're just gonna unroll it. You know what I realized I didn't do? I didn't wet this. This is supposed to be wet. Lord. 24 years I've been making this. 24 years. And I done messed up. All right, we are just gonna get that filling on the inside. spread it around as evenly as possible. You don't want to really get too far off of the edges, otherwise it'll ooze out while you roll it back up. But that's about it. This is all it takes to make a pumpkin roll. Of course, my cream cheese isn't as smooth as it should be because I hand mixed it, but I'm not serving it to anybody besides me, my husband, my mom, and my daughter. Will be the only ones to eat it this year, and I can tell you they don't mind one little bit. All right, now we're gonna get this rolled up, but you're not gonna roll it back up in your tea towel. You're gonna get it rolled and then you will put it in plastic wrap. Okay, so get it rolled back up the same direction that you had it, previously. I'm going to get this into plastic wrap and then I will put it in the fridge overnight, because tomorrow I will put it into thirds basically. Well, I'll have a smaller portion for my mom, but my daughter and I then will take the rest, and then I will freeze it because we've got several days now until Thanksgiving. So I definitely should have had this towel wet. So don't be like me. Wet your towel. Okay. Still gonna taste good. There you have it. Pumpkin roll for Thanksgiving. I wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope your bellies are full and everyone is able to gather around, whether it's a large group or small group. I hope you share it with whomever it is you care for, and I hope everyone is safe, and I wish you nothing but blessings this Thanksgiving season. I'll see you soon.